All right, guys, back again, and let's talk about Toby Hooper's Eaten Alive, which is a first watch. There's been a lot of first watches recently for me, and Eaten Alive is interesting because it is Toby Hooper's film after the Texas Chainsaw Massacre. It is his second horror movie. The other movies he did before this, you could arguably debate. The movie Eggshells had some horror elements because it just was weird as hell, and he did that Peter, Mary, and Paul Song is Love documentary movie, whatever. So he didn't do any horror until Texas Chainsaw Massacre, and then after that he did this movie. So it's interesting to see him as a director direct two movies that are really trippy or musical, and then you get his horror movies, and you get the Texas Chainsaw Massacre, which is, I think, the scariest horror movie ever, and I still stand by that. It is terrifying. And every time I watch it, I still feel chills watching it, just how it's shot, how it looks. It feels like it's a snuff film. It's horrifying. And I was so interested to watch Eaten Alive, and I saw it was on Amazon Prime for free. Hell yeah, definitely. And I kind of want to get this one now. I do want to watch this movie again. Like, I want to own it, because I really thought that it's an interesting movie, because you go from the Texas Chainsaw Massacre and then you go to this movie. And I'm going to say this right now. I don't think that this movie is as good as the Texas Chainsaw Massacre, but that's really a hard role to fill, because it's watching these two movies together. Like, they're different, because this movie, the basic plot of this is that there's this crazy guy, Judd, who owns this motel, and he has a killer crocodile, and he kills people with a scythe, or he makes the crocodile eat people. And it's really ridiculous, and it's, of course, in Texas, and of course it's got Marilyn Burns in it getting tortured at the end. So it's funny that there's a lot of similarities to the Texas Chainsaw Massacre, and it's also written by Kim Hinkle as well, which is pretty funny, like he did for the Texas Chainsaw Massacre. But this movie is odd. It's interesting because the movie is like an in-between for the first Texas Chainsaw Massacre and Texas Chainsaw Massacre 2. You've got a very serious horror movie with a few comedic elements, first Texas Chainsaw Massacre, and then you have the Texas Chainsaw Massacre Part 2, which is a full-on comedy. And this movie meshes them both together, where it's not completely a horror comedy, but it has a lot of funny moments, which is interesting because, like I said, you go from the first Texas Chainsaw Massacre, which is, for the most part, a really scary movie with a few funny moments, and then you've got this movie, which is scary and funny, then Texas Chainsaw Massacre 2, which is pure comedy. So it's interesting seeing the distinction between these movies and watching the differences, and I like that this movie is in between them both, like it's sandwiched between two tones. But I wouldn't be lying if I didn't say that the movie is not as good because of that, in my opinion. Like, I felt like the movie had some funny moments or comedic moments that weren't super funny to me, and I also thought that it's just kind of jarring watching the differences of humor and horror in this movie. There are some moments where I lost it. Like, this movie is really scary in some elements. Scenes of the crocodile eating people, I think, is scary. Scenes of Judd going around and chasing little Kyle Richards with a giant ass scythe is scary. And I like that this movie is scary, but it has other moments where it doesn't gel as much as the Texas Chainsaw Massacre. It doesn't feel as coherent, if that makes sense. But despite that, I still really thought that this movie had some great moments. Like I said, there are some scary moments with the crocodile. There are some scary moments with Judd. And then there's some really silly moments. There's some that I enjoy, though. I enjoyed Robert Englund in this movie. That's cool to see him. He's this redneck character who just is having sex with all these hookers, and it's pretty funny. But it's also creepy as well, because he's like manhandling these women. But it's still, at the same time, is interesting a role. I liked him in this role. I thought he was funny in a lot of moments, but he's also really intimidating. And all these characters are very odd and strange, and like the Texas Chainsaw Massacre, but all of them didn't completely work for me. Like I felt like some of them were funny, some of them were fine, then some of them I'm just like, okay. There were a lot of characters in this movie. It felt like there were too many. And this seems like a nitpick, but I felt like there were too many characters, if that makes sense. But like I said, it does a really good job at being creepy sometimes, but it also just doesn't do a great job at being the like overly interesting. Like I thought there were moments that were funny, I thought there were moments that were scary, but I felt like there were moments that just I'm like, why is this in the movie? Like what's the point? It just didn't feel like there was much of a as much of a story involved, and that's weird to say because it's not really a movie that's bent on story. It felt like there were too many characters. But like I said, there are some really interesting moments, and I did enjoy this movie. It just kind of polarized me in a way where I was just like, I like a lot of things, a lot about it, but there's just things I'm like, it's whatever. And it's hard to really explain the things that I didn't really like, but I don't know. I don't really know how to explain it. Again, I thought it's funny that this is a spiritual sequel, I guess, to the Texas Chainsaw Massacre because it's in Texas. It's got Marilyn Burns being tortured. It's got crazy ass lunatics going around killing, and it just it feels like it's in the universe of the Texas Chainsaw Massacre. It feels like it's connected in a way, even though it's not. Like maybe like a couple of counties away, that's where the Texas Chainsaw Massacre is happening at the moment this movie's happening. Like it feels like that, and I did like that as well. I thought that was cool, and I liked the way the movie looked as well. It just didn't completely gel for me throughout, but I thought that it did an interesting job, and I did enjoy it, and I do definitely want to watch it again. I'm very open to rewatching it because I did enjoy things about it a lot. But comparing it to the Texas Chainsaw Massacre is hard because it's like you're comparing, for me, the scariest horror movie ever to a movie that's got some scary moments, but not as good. So it's kind of ludicrous to say that in comparison to the two movies, but I think that I still enjoyed this movie. It was fun. I dug it. Overall, I did enjoy it a lot. I thought it was entertaining. So nitpicks aside, it was a fun time. So that is my review on Tobe Hooper's Eaten Alive. Tell me down below what you guys think of the movie, and thank you guys for watching.